Hello everyone and welcome back once again to Microsoft Flight Simulator, and welcome to a Flight Simulator tutorial. Today we have in front of us the gorgeous, the beautiful, the magnificent fly-by-wire A320. And we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to go from the cold and dark state that we're in right now to ready to taxi. I know that's one of the things that sometimes stops folks from getting into the more study level type aircraft are just some of the basic functions. So if I can, get one of them checked off of your list, then I'm more than happy to do that. We find ourselves today at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. That's not important, though. We're not going to be actually going anywhere, just doing a startup. So nonetheless, let's hop in the cockpit and begin. Okay, and here we are in our cold and dark A320 Neo. Neo standing for New Engine Option, for those of you who didn't know, but that's neither here nor there. We're going to be going from this completely cold and dark powerless setup to ready to taxi. Should take 15 to 20 minutes. 7 of those minutes are going to be the IRS line time, but we can overlap other functions while we do so. So we're going to head up to this top overhead panel here. And you can see our power switches for battery 1 and 2, as well as the display outputs for each battery. 27.3 volts on battery 1, 27.4 on battery 2. These are 28 volt batteries. So we'll go ahead and turn each one of those on. Then I'm going to immediately come down to our emergency light switch. That actually would normally be in the off position. I'm going to set that to arm. And then I'm going to reset our master caution and master warning. Back up on the overhead panel, one of the very first things we want to do after initializing the main battery power is to get our auxiliary power unit, or APU, started. So I'm going to turn that master switch on, wait just a few seconds for everything in the APU to initialize, and then hit the start switch. Turn on our navigation lights so people know that there is power going to the airplane, and then we'll sit back and wait a little bit while the APU spools on the outside. While we're waiting there, I'm going to go ahead and bring up our display brightnesses for our PFD, our MFD, our ICAM, and the lower display ICAM. And then we'll do the same for the PFD and the MFD on our Copilot side. These knobs here are for our main instrument cluster brightness here, so this obviously adjusts the displays, and then this will adjust your backlighting once power is available. In fact, I'll turn that down for now just so you can see. Still waiting on the APU, should be ready. There it is. So you heard a big kick over of our main bus. You can see we have all of our displays showing self-test in progress. You can hear air blowing. Another thing you're going to want to do straight away as soon as you have your APU set, go ahead and set your climate control as needed using these 3 knobs, and then we're going to come down to the APU bleed switch and turn that on, and that's going to take bleed air from one of the compressor stages of the APU and introduce it into our HVAC system, as well as feed our engines, each one of our engines, for startup. Next, I'm going to come up to this address panel up here. This is for our inertial reference systems, 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to turn each one of these to nav and wait for my on battery indication just below the address to extinguish itself. Looks like one doesn't have an on battery. Oh, there it is. So we'll wait for that light to extinguish. And then we'll do number 3. Again, wait for the light to illuminate and then extinguish. Now, I believe on the real A320, and maybe it's not the case for the Neos, but on the real A320s, I've seen plenty of videos, this light illuminates almost immediately after moving the switch from off to your nav position, and then the 3rd position, and we don't need to wait for that one. So while that's going, we'll finish our lighting. So like I was saying before, this rocker switch here adjusts our display brightness on our actual numbers for all of our autopilot settings, and then this will adjust the backlight setting for each one of those knobs. So just set your lighting as needed. This lights up your ICAM panel as well as your throttle quadrant. This guy is going to be for your floodlights underneath your secondary interfaces, and then there's a floodlight for this area here as well, so you can turn that on and off as needed. Now, if you happen to be in a situation where it's dark out, let's say, and you can't find all of these switches straight away, there is a switch for the dome light right here in the midst of all of your other interior lights. So you can turn that to bright, and that's going to turn on your overhead dome lights. And I flicked it on mistake while toggling the dome light, but there is a light for your standby compass, but we don't have one, so not really sure what that does on this airplane nonetheless. Next up, you're going to want to turn on your fuel pumps, and now the default fuel configuration for the Neo, the fly-by-wire Neo, is to have no fuel in your center tank, and obviously you don't want to be running your center fuel tank pumps with no fuel in them. You'll cavitate them, they'll burn themselves out in 15 to 30 seconds. So we'll add a little bit of fuel to our center tanks, and then you can actually, on the fly-by-wire, what's really nice is all of these different switches work independently. So we'll come down to here and you can see fuel quantities in each tank, and you can also note the shutoffs, the amber box with the lines through them indicating we don't have pumps on. So we'll go ahead and turn on all of our fuel pumps, and then we should see a change there. So now we're pumping fuel from the main tanks out to the wing tanks. The wing tanks feed the engines, and then we have our aux tanks and the tips. Still waiting on our alignment. That takes about 7 minutes from start, so it's been about 2 minutes since we've started that sequence, so we'll see an alignment in about 5 minutes. In the meantime, we'll turn on our little fly pad. We're not going to be using that today. In the meantime, we can go through the engine start process. It's actually very simple on this airplane. We're going to turn on our flashing beacon. Those are the flashing red lights on the top and bottom of the aircraft, and that lets everyone around the airplane know, hey, we're getting ready to start the engines, or the engines are running. So we'll leave that to run for just a second or two, and then we're going to come down to our, I keep wanting to call it ICAS, it's ECAM on the Airbus. I keep wanting to call it ICAS. On Boeing, it's ICAS. Engine Indication and Crew Alerting System. I don't know what ECAM stands for, but I'm guessing it's something similar. Engine Crew something management, I'm not sure. So we want to select our engine feed before we had fuel selected. We want to select our engine feed so we can see more parameters on our engines, oil pressures, oil temperatures, vibration, stuff like that, as compared to just N1 speed, our exhaust gas temperature, N2, or the core of the engine speed, and then our fuel flow in kilograms per hour. So we've got that selected. Next, I'm going to come over to our engine run mode switch, and there are 3 positions actually for this switch. There is normal, which is what we're going to be using for normal flight. Crank, if you want to spin the engine without actually moving or firing the igniters, and then ignition/start, which is what we're going to use. So we're going to move the switch to the right, and you can actually hear the aircraft automatically, and this is something cool that the Airbuses do that the Boeings don't. You're going to hear my bleed air stop. So we'll switch to the right. Did you hear how it quieted down in there like that? So that took our bleed air from our packs, or our passenger air conditioning, and it's now feeding all of our bleed air to our number 1 engines. The packs have shut. There's a isolation valve on each one of these to shut. So beacon on, engine in the starting sequence, and the rest is all controlled by the FADEC, or the Full Authority Digital Engine Control. So we're going to go ahead and start engine 1, and that's just done by moving this switch into the forward position. We'll come on to our ECAM here, and we'll monitor our start parameters, looking for oil pressure first and foremost, and then we want to make sure our EGT does not exceed its critical temperature, and then we also want to make sure that our N2, our engine core speed, is accelerating and not hanging, getting to a hung start. So there's our light off. Oil pressure is now in the green. We're watching our EGT. making sure we're not going to crest here, and I don't think we're going to get anywhere close to there. Watching our N2, as well as any vibrations in our main fan N1 or N2. I don't remember what the exact numbers are for those, but we're well within. Once we hit around 60%, you'll hear the main bus kick over again, and we'll get our bleed air back because engine 1 is up and running. There it is. So there's the kick over to the main bus. In through 60%, and then starting engine 2 is the exact same process. Move our switch to the forward position. And we'll address some of these enunciations we have on our right-hand side of the crew alert in just a second. Some of those are actually going to go away. You can see the hydraulic PTU went away. It's because we now have hydraulic pressure in our number 2 engine. Still watching those parameters. EGTs rising nice and slow. N2 is accelerating. We've got rotation in our N1. Plenty of oil pressure. And that looks like a successful light off of engine 2 as well. And there's our kickover from our number 2 engine onto the main bus. So at this time what I like to do normally is I will actually shut off our Apu Bleed, so we don't need it anymore. And then we will switch our engines back to normal. And that'll bring our bleed air back in, so the air in the cabin gets nice and conditioned however we want. You might have noticed while we were doing that start procedure, we now have fully functioning screens now, so I can, you know, change my MFD, can change my ranges, stuff like that. I don't have a flight plan loaded, so you're not going to see that, but normally if you had a flight plan, that would show up on here. You'd have a radial going off in whatever direction you're supposed to be flying. You can add one in the, I almost called this the MFC. The, oh my god, what are you called? Flight management computer? What? FMC, there it is, okay. You can add that manually in here if you wanted to. We're not going to be going into the FMC today. It was just a little bit too much for just a cold and dark to ready to taxi. So then you're going to want to go ahead and set up your radios as needed, set your transponder as needed. You'll get all of that information from your controller. Go ahead and lock our cockpit door. Big ka-chunk. We'll check the video feed, make sure there's nobody loitering there. And that's pretty much it. Your aircraft would be good to go now. Set, again, you know, set your flaps and all that stuff. We can go ahead and take a look at our enunciation here. There's a few other little housekeeping things you can elect to do. These are not required to take the airplane off. We could take the airplane off to the active right now and take off if we wanted to. So, first off is our park brake. That is our little guy down here. If you wanted to shut that off, I'm going to leave it on for now because we're not going anywhere. But if you wanted to shut that off, that's that guy there. Predictive wind shear. Pred WS is predictive wind shear. That is going to be this guy here. So we'll set that to automatic. And I believe this is something along the lines of ground collision, GCS. Similar to a GPWS, ground proximity warning system. And I honestly don't know what multi-scans is. I think it has to do with our radar. A lot of this is our radar control. So you have weather, and turbulence, map, and then off for all of your different radar settings. I like weather and turbulence. And then if you wanted to select which system you wanted to use, you could do System 1, off, or System 2, and that'll draw your weather, your turbulence, whatever you have. No tilt implemented yet, and that's okay, you know, for the most part. You know, I don't use it too much in flight sim. Gain would be nice, but I'm sure that's, you know, still to come. Fly-by-wire has done a fantastic job with this airplane. So now, the toggling of my parking brake triggered this checklist. This is our takeoff checklist. And there's actually a button here that you can push for your takeoff configuration. And what it'll do is it'll run through this checklist. And obviously we don't have anything currently set up for takeoff. So if I push this button now, we're going to get a red indication saying something along the lines of takeoff configuration not met. Our master warning is going to go off and it's going to start beeping, like so. So you saw our master warning came up there, and you can see all of the different things we have not in the takeoff configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and clear those warnings, and then let's go through each one of these items except for the cabin check. I don't know how to change that, so we're going to leave that one in the check. But takeoff auto brake, that's going to be this guy here, so we want to set that to the maximum setting. Nope, I can't because I have the park brake on. Hello? Why can I not set you to max? There we go. Because I had the brakes on, partially. So, takeoff auto brake max. We'll leave brakes partially set. Signs on, so that's going to be your fasten seatbelt. And no smoking / no portable devices. I also should have pointed out there is a option to light up your overhead lighting if you wanted to have this panel illuminated. Signs are on. Again, I'm not sure about the cabin check. That's something I might have to read up more on myself. Spoilers set to arm. This is your spoiler switch here. So as you move this aft, your wing spoilers move up and down. So we want to arm them though. So to arm our spoilers, our ground spoilers, we're actually going to push this all the way forward and lift up on the actual control. For us, it's just moving the mouse forward, but you can see the difference, armed versus unarmed. So ground spoilers are now armed. Flaps set to takeoff, that's just our first notch of flaps. Flaps are on the other side of the spoilers. So we're going to set flaps to 1, like so. And then we actually have a indication of where they're commanded to, those blue chevrons, versus where our slats and our flaps actually are. So you can see our slats and flaps as they move to where they are, and then we get a green indication saying that's where they're supposed to be. And then very last, we hit our takeoff configuration. Takeoff configuration normal. And you're good to go. Again, set your lights as needed. You've got landing lights here, taxi lights, strobe lights. I leave those set to automatic. They're connected to the weight on wheel sensor, so you'll actually not have strobe lights on your takeoff roll. You'll have them shortly after you rotate, which is fine for me. But that is pretty much everything you need to get the airplane ready to fly. And if you want, in another episode, we can look at actually flying the aircraft, the different V speeds for takeoff, different speeds for landing, how to interact with the autopilot, that sort of thing. But we'll make that another video. This was just a quick video on how to get your airplane up and ready to fly, which we've successfully done. And that'll be the end of it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it immensely. I will catch you guys in the next video. And as always, take it easy.